Thank you. No, we've not received any apologies today.
Declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests and other disclosable interests. Anybody? I wouldn't have thought so, necessarily. Nope. Okay. Right, the minutes from the previous meeting. Have people had a look? I didn't think there was anything too bad on that. Can I have a proposal that we accept them, please? Councillor Rain and Councillor Clark for seconding. Thank you. Right. In terms of my announcement, we have got a work programme which we have circulated, but we are going to add to that. There are going to be a number of things added to it as a result of pre-meeting. Barbara is going to have her issues dealt with. We will talk about that some other time. Well, not dealt with. I mean, we're going to put it on the agenda. Sorry, I shouldn't suggest we'll come to a conclusion on that. Yes, it is it? Right. Very inappropriate. Apologise for that then. Yes. Make sure that we don't end up in the wrong way there. And the other things that we went through are all on the list anyway, except for we didn't mention enforcement at the pre-meeting because we were going to have planning enforcement to come in and talk about things. If you remember, we agreed on that. So I will add that to the list if everybody's happy with that. We need them. Yes, they will be welcome. Right, okay. I haven't really got any other announcements other than hello and welcome to our guests from the Environment Agency. Thank you very much for coming tonight. And I don't think there's any public participation. So we can go straight on into your time with us, if that would be okay.
Yeah, of course.
Right. Questions?
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say they've already been sent on to Dave here. Do you want me to read them out before you, or do you want to just go through what you've got?
Well, it might be worth reading them out, and then everyone's clear which one I'm answering then.
No problem. So I'll go with the first one that I have on my list, which was how soon will the flood risk management plan for the Severn Valley, including the river team through Worcester, downstream along the River Severn to Upton upon Severn and beyond, be fully updated to reflect the cumulative impact of both existing and planned flood defence schemes and developments?
Great, thank you. And good to meet you all. Pleasure to be here. So the new hydraulic models, two new hydraulic models, one for the River Severn and one for the River Team, which we've been working on for some time now, are both nearing completion. I'm sure some of you will appreciate they have taken longer than we'd originally hoped. These things are inevitable sometimes when with such complex and large models. The River Severn model, as you'll know, is the largest model that we have in the country. But we are hoping that they're due for completion now by the end of the year. That's this calendar year. Both of those models include updated hydrology for the catchments. Hydrology being the nature of the catchment, so that's taking into account rainfall and the sort of typical rainfall patterns that happen across each of the sub-catchments in each of those models. The runoff, so that's the ground type and aspect to determine the rates of runoff in different parts of the catchment. Infiltration with soil types and the like, and a number of other aspects as well, to make sure that that hydrology accurately reflects any changes in the catchment that have happened over time. It's important to note as well, I've jotted down, it's important to note that runoff rates due to new development are also managed through the planning process to ensure that they don't increase as a result. So for Malvern Hills District Council area, the lead local flood authority, which is Worcestershire County Council, is the planning consultee that carries out that role in looking at development and what surface water management options are being presented and whether or not they're appropriate or not. Is there any follow-on questions on that item?
Douglas.
Does it work? Does it work? Do you get enough feedback from County Council to show what you're doing and what we're building isn't ending up in the rivers and causing more floods? Because counterintuitively, everybody knows that it is. And therefore, perhaps the planning process is wrong or not providing the information correctly, or they're hiding it, or permeable surfaces aren't permeable enough and nobody's enforcing it correctly. It does seem to be, you know, all our drainage systems which were put in the 40s, 50s and 60s are basically too small now. Why? Is it just the environment, or is it mankind affecting building, all the runoff that we get from all the roofs, all the new factory sheds? You know, and I know every time we see a thing up, it's got a sustainable water management plan or SUDS or something or other. Do they work? Or is there any way that you know that they're working and getting sufficient feedback? Thank you, Chairman.
We're sort of outside the role of the Environment Agency a little here, in that it's the lead local flood authority that looks at these things and approves them. But my personal opinion on that is that these things, if they're properly designed, properly constructed, and the key is properly maintained, then yes, they do work when compared to not putting them in at all. But my colleagues at Worcestershire County, Matt McGuinness is the flood risk manager there. I'm sure some of you know him, and his team work very hard to ensure that this type of thing is taken into account and developed appropriately.
Just add to that we have locally we have the South Worcestershire Land Drainage Partnership as well, that inputs planning applications, partly delegated from the county to the local team that operates across South Worcestershire. So Martin Cross. No, based in Pershore, based at Wychavon. So that's the team over there based at Pershore operates across the three South Worcestershire councils and help with planning applications and advice around land drainage.
Dean.
He'd fall down, so the SUDS won't be working there anyway, or that, in my humble opinion. But again, probably not addressed to you, but I'll express my concern.
Actually, I was going to say something. Or do you want to? Anybody else? It is quite clear that if you look at what's happened, for example, on the Wye, a 200-year flood happened within the last 5 years. I mean, if we had that in the Severn, a lot of what has been built over the last 20 or 30 years would be destroyed. I mean, it is crucial for development, particularly with the large numbers of housing that is going to be put forward, that this catchment total calculation as to where the water could go, because we used to live right next to it in Ryle, but we were on a hill, but we were still in flood area 1, even though we were 50 feet above the river, because the next bit wasn't 50 feet above the river. The calculations never made sense, you know, and I really do think that if I was living in Tewkesbury or on the way to Gloucester, further down from all of what I have seen, I mean, we went to the Kempsey flood defences not long ago. Brilliant. All this work is just fantastic. But it is channeling the water in ways which nature never designed it to go. And therefore, what safeguards have people living in housing further down the line got? And more to the point, are the developers really taking that into consideration? That's the real question, isn't it? Because they'll build the houses, people will move in, it won't happen for 5 years. But if they'd known, that people wouldn't have bought that house, that there was a risk that it could happen that badly. And why doesn't each individual house have a flood risk element to it attached to it legally, you know, so that you can actually judge that? Why should you have to go out and look for it? You know, because it's the biggest investment everybody ever makes in their entire life. I just thought, you know, is there any progress on that at all?
Well, we have come sort of back into one of the Environment Agency's roles on that front, in that I mentioned that the lead local flood authority is a planning consultee. Well, the EA is a statutory consultee as well, and we look at things in terms of flood risk from main river. So, like you mentioned, the River Severn around Tewkesbury, the River Team. So, when a development is put forward for planning, the developer will have to submit a flood risk assessment, which adequately assesses the flood risk not only from the development in terms of the surface water management, but the flood risk to the development as well from watercourses, including main rivers. And we look at those to ensure that they're robust and fit for purpose, and that they take the right up-to-date parameters into account, including factors for climate change, so that any levels that are set for finished floors are okay and will be okay into the future with a range of climate change scenarios. So that's where we come in to help ensure that future housing is resilient in terms of flood risk.
Can I just ask you one question then? How many times have you actually told the developer no?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but I can find some figures from our planning colleagues if that would be useful. It's something that we do say. Rest assured, we do, because as I'm sure you'll appreciate, the quality of flood risk assessments that we review varies considerably.
Yeah, and the only organisation that could actually be across the board on this is yours, because I know you've referred to planning authorities, but they all have borders, whereas the Environment Agency doesn't. Well, sea to sea, basically. Yeah, because we obviously, this is the reason why you're here. We're worried about that, and we are worried about things that have happened. I mean, I talked about the 200-year flood on the River Wye, but I think last year the River Monnow was backed up because of the Wye being flooded up, and Monmouth absolutely trashed, and that was the first time again for 50 years. And I went there not long ago, and the shops still haven't recovered, and the same thing could happen to Tenbury, could happen to Upton upon Severn. We're really worried about it, and I think there is not enough reassurance that very important long-term issue is being dealt with to that degree. Can I just put that across, I think, on behalf of everybody? Yeah? Okay.
Paul? Oh,
Sorry, Christine.
yeah. I want to back that up, actually, because one of my questions was about future-proofing and how you model it, and whether those models are having to change a lot faster than you originally thought, in POIC, when they were doing the modelling for there and doing the defences. They were 100-year risk and very quickly flooded, and so they had to keep building higher and higher. So I am concerned about the modelling. My area, I just sit on an internal drainage board, and down in Longdon, I saw Vic look at me. He put me on it. It's about demaining a river, and in Longdon, the board is applied to demain the river, but it's because it's not been managed properly by the Environment Agency. So the internal drainage board can clear it and look after it, maintain it a lot better. And I was wondering how you were actually looking into solutions like that to flooding, especially down in the Longdon area, to make sure you're working together. I know the Environment Agency do work with the internal drainage boards, but they seem to have gone through a lot of trouble to get this demaining, and basically it was because it wasn't maintained properly. So that's an area that I'm concerned about because it could be happening in other places.
So is your question about our sort of ability or want to demain in?
Yes, I mean, are you actively looking at some of these areas where the maintenance isn't good enough, and are you going to improve your maintenance strategy, or are you going to, especially the lower Severn, begin to look at alternative ways?
In terms of the maintenance that we undertake, we have to target our maintenance activities where they'll get the most outcome for the expenditure. So typically that means that we are targeting our maintenance activities in more urban areas where there's more homes and businesses that will benefit. We can't maintain everywhere, so we have to prioritise which areas will get the most bang for the buck. As part of that, we also ensure that others undertake their maintenance responsibilities as well. So where we're made aware that riparian land ownership responsibilities haven't been undertaken and are causing problems, then we can liaise with those landowners to, in the first instance, to encourage them to do what's required. And we do have powers to take action if necessary. Again, we would target the use of those resources to use our powers where they'll have the most impact. We also are able to sort of proactively contact landowners using the, and don't quote me on the terminology because I can never remember quite how it's worded, but the West Midlands bylaws, and that's for the whole of the West Midlands, Severn Trent area, whereby there are certain subsections of that where landowners are not supposed to leave debris on the banks of rivers that could become mobilised and should there be a flood. A lot of people aren't aware of that, for example, so we can use those bylaws to help encourage people to keep things clear and improve through flows.
I think you've hit the nail on the head really with my concern. You said it's predominantly an urban area, but we're a pretty rural county, and especially well, I know in other areas, but down towards Longdon, Castlemorton, all those areas, they are getting flooded more increasingly, and it would just be nice if you could use your powers a bit more. I mean, just the urban area, our area is actually predominantly rural, so just giving a shout out for the chaos that it causes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm straying onto my notes that I'd made for one of the other questions now, but the first step in us contacting landowners using our powers is for us to receive a report of a specific issue. So I'd ask if you're aware of any such specific issues. You can report them via our incident hotline, which is 0800 80 70 60. Or you can now report them with a photo via gov.uk. if you just search report an environmental incident, it comes up.
I ask this because one of my parish councils are very keen on me trying to find out the answers. So you've given me a few names and contacts. Thank you.
Talking about individual incidents. Oh, sorry, Cynthia.
Let's go back to the suds because that seemed to be the in thing to put on a new estate. And I'm sure some of them work, but I am concerned that given another 10 years, a lot of them will be so clogged up with something or other that they won't. The other thing that worries me about those things is there's no fences round them. Now, new estates get young families have little kiddies. And it does worry me that they're just left open. Does it worry you, or do you just accept it and say yes?
I'm afraid I would have to defer to the county council for that, because that's not something that the Environment Agency is consulted on.
Okay, that's fine.
I was going to report something. Basically, it's something called Glinchbrook. 3,500 houses planned on junction 2 of the M50. And there is an Environment Agency element to this, because anybody who ever used to come off at that junction and then come to Malvern has to go through a dip where the brook is. And the brook floods that entire area completely and completely makes the roads impassable. And yet this is being put forward as part of the Forest of Dean plan. It's not our area, admittedly, but I mean, it's the reason why we are affected by it is that the Malvern Hills would be affected by it because the views from there, the National Landscape has objected to it. But surely something as big as that, you know, you would know immediately that there were problems with this from a watercourse point of view. Why do these things not get ruled out at that early stage rather than having, you know, because you would know where the water courses are, you'd know about all of this flooding, because let's face it, you will have dealt with flood issues over the generations in relation to something like that. And yet this is still being put around as if it's going to go into their local plan without any kind of whatever. I mean, it's been delayed at the moment, I think, but I just wondered what you thought about something as vast as that and how that fits into your remit in the Environment Agency rather than just being planning, because there has to be some input from the start to rule out things like that if they are totally unfit, surely.
Yeah, as well as being consulted on individual planning applications, we're also a consultee for local plans as well. So we do feed into that sort of site suitability assessment that's in those local plans. Again, excuse my terminology because it's a good few years since I've actually personally done that. But for that specific example, I'm not sure whether the watercourse that you mentioned is a main river. Did you say the Glinch Brook?
Oh, no, it's not a main river.
No.
Except when it floods.
Yeah. In terms of size, sometimes what is and isn't a main river, it doesn't follow common sense. But if it's not a main river, then it's an ordinary watercourse, and that one would go to the lead local flood authority in terms of statutory consultee comments. So again, it would be Worcestershire County for that one. I mean, I would like to think for a site. Oh, is it? My apology. Yeah.
It's on our border, and we just think it's probably the craziest thing we've ever seen, and it's how that has got even to that stage without there being some serious consideration. Luckily, as well, also by the way, the national gas main goes right the way through the middle of it, so it will have huge problems. But it was just that as an example of how something as big as that, would you have an input? And now you've kind of clearly indicated that you should. But I just don't understand how something of that size you wouldn't take it away almost and have a really detailed look at it, because it shouldn't go through unless you guys are happy with it. And some of these smaller authorities might not be able to see the bigger picture. Does that make sense?
We would be looking at the suitability of the site as a whole from a flood risk perspective. I presume emergency planners would be looking at it from an access perspective. If, like you say, the access is over a road that regularly floods, I would think that they would take that into account. But what I would say is that the teams at the lead local flood authority, so for Gloucestershire, that's James Blockley's team, they are all fantastic, and they're more than happy to have a conversation with you about your concerns. And sometimes they might learn about some of these local problems from you, and to help them form their judgment. So I would say definitely do contact them, and I can share their contact details if you haven't got them.
I think Christine would like to know a bit more about that.
I'm kind of following on from you again. It's about the internal drainage board again, because it's not that far from their boundary. So I did ask if they would look into it and if they had a viewpoint. They did say they weren't consultees, but they did conclude that it was a completely inappropriate place to put this monstrous planning idea, 3,500 houses bigger than Ledbury. So I just wanted to say there are other experts that have said this is not appropriate.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to ask any questions? We'll go on to the next.
So the next question was, is there any liaison between the Environment Agency and Worcestershire County Council Highways regarding the impact of water and flooding on road infrastructure, including cases where roads are undermined or collapsed, such as the A449 incident? And then that also includes, does the EA take any responsibility for the maintenance and management of watercourses, drainage systems and other water infrastructure in relation to flooding issues? And then what action is being taken to investigate and address the underground or surface water flooding in the affected areas?
Okay, thank you. So firstly, on the first point, I'd say we're always happy to talk to the county council and provide them with advice and guidance on any permitting requirements it may have for highway works that interact with main rivers. Just to expand on that a little bit, in a similar vein to getting planning permission, if you want to do work in or around a main river, you also need an environmental permit from the Environment Agency, and we have our own process for that. And the requirement for a permit does extend to highway works as well. So I'm not quite sure of the nature of the 449 incident offhand.
Well, it is a road that's probably about 700, 800 feet above sea level. So it's not by the river by any stretch of the imagination. And the problem with that whole area of the Malvern Hills is the nature of the hill structure, in the sense that water flows through it. I mean, it's a spa town. We've had a history of water. And therefore, the Environment Agency, in a way, could have had a role in making sure that whatever designs take place in terms of road structure and maintenance of those road structures doesn't fall foul of that particular set of circumstances that the hills kind of present. Because it's not just on, the trouble is as well that the hills are split into two, because Herefordshire's got one side, Malvern Hills District Council got the other. Well, Worcestershire County Council, sorry, I should say, because that's the road authority. And you just feel, looking at some of the damage that's taken place, that, you know, it was inevitable because of the way that the hills pour water out of them at random, almost, depending on how heavy the water is and how the hill structure underneath the roads kind of channels it out. And that means that they should have been built with that into consideration and maintained on that basis. And we've got a road now which has been closed for the best part of 12 months now, I think. And it's likely to stay closed for another 12 months. And that's an A road. It's not a minor road. It's one of the few ways of getting over the hills that every vehicle could travel on. And believe me, the substitutes now are almost in a state of collapse because they are now taking HGVs, which they were never designed to take. And it's a huge issue. And yet nobody seems to kind of have an overall governance of it or even a look at it, really. And I just wondered if there was anything that the Environment Agency has done within hilly areas where water runoff is crucial because it needs to be dealt with in a different way, especially the hills being so permeable, because they really are. I mean, we have festivals of fountains and waterfalls and all kinds of, well, we don't, I'm exaggerating, but anyway, there are lots of wells. It's called Malvern Wells for a good reason.
Yeah, I'm afraid no, the answer really is no. We don't get involved in the design of highway infrastructure. We leave that to the Highway Authority, whether that be Worcestershire County in this case or National Highways for the trunk road network. Like I say, the only sort of help and guidance that we will give is if there's a requirement for an environmental permit, we can help steer them through that process to get a better result for everyone. But apart from that, we don't get involved. The lead local flood authority, again, Worcestershire County, is also the authority with responsibility for managing groundwater flood risk. So obviously they sit within the same authority as the Highway Authority. So they will talk closely, I'm sure.
Thank you for that.
So in terms of our responsibility for the maintenance and management of watercourses, drainage systems and other infrastructure in relation to flooding issues. It's our role to manage flood risk on main rivers and from the sea. So main rivers and the sea and coastal erosion. Main rivers in this patch, as you know, the Severn and the team, but we do that through targeted maintenance activities, typically in high-risk urban locations, as I said earlier, ensuring that others undertake their maintenance responsibilities. The one thing that I've not added to that yet is that we also construct and maintain flood risk management schemes to reduce flood risk to communities and to infrastructure. Everyone will be well familiar with the well-known ones across the local area. We're also currently on site in Severnstoke constructing a new scheme there for the community. The pub, the church and the A38. It certainly has, and I think it's fair to say that everyone, us included, is incredibly happy that it's now on site and going to be in place for next winter. It's been a long time coming and a lot of hard work, but yeah, we're really pleased to have it on site now. Just on the last point about underground surface water flooding, again, like I said before, that's with how flood risk is managed across England. The Environment Agency looks at main river and the sea. The lead local flood authority, Worcestershire County, looks at surface water, groundwater and ordinary watercourses, which is the
So basically part of the floodplain was being recycled, which was the best thing about it, rather than it being new material coming from further away. There is a huge amount of earth being dug up at the moment in Upton, or just on the road. I wondered, do you monitor any of those kind of things that affect the floodplain on a temporary basis? Because if there was a major flood while some of these things going on. It could, you know, if it was really extreme, just push things over the edge. So, yeah, do you keep an eye on those kind of things on more detail?
Absolutely. In terms of temporary stockpiling in the floodplain, that absolutely comes under the requirement for an environmental permit from us. So we would look at whether there's potential for that stockpile to have a material impact on the the storage of floodwater, because effectively you're removing flood storage capability from the floodplain. In some places that could have a large impact. In other places it might be acceptable temporarily, with measures in place to take action if required. But yeah, we look at all of that as part of an environmental permit.
Did you want to ask anything, Martin? About? No.
Last one. Could you please clarify what role the Environment Agency has in ensuring that our watercourses remain obstruction free, and how do you work with the riparian landowners to ensure that they fulfil their responsibilities? There is a concern that for several years watercourses through the Team Valley have not been maintained to the required standard, particularly where the obstructions that pose a clear flood risk have not been removed. A recent example being a tree that breached the River Team at Nightwick.
Whilst it might not be possible to ensure that all watercourses remain entirely obstruction free, we do help to raise awareness with riparian owners about the need to fulfil their maintenance responsibilities, and we talked about that a little bit earlier. So, like I say, we will always target our resources at locations that will bring the most benefit to homes and livelihoods, using our powers to carry out maintenance in high risk locations. Like I say, that's typically the more urban areas where there's more homes and more livelihoods, and that intervention will make a bigger difference. But when we receive a report of an issue via the 0800 number or via the website, each of those reports will go, if it's a flooding issue, it goes to the duty, the flood incident duty officer. I had to think what it was in full terms because everything's acronyms at the Environment Agency. So it will go to the duty flood incident duty officer, who will assess each report of each incident, and that's the first stage of us deciding whether or not we need to intervene. So for example, if we got a report of a large stockpile of material in the floodplain, our flood incident duty officer would look at that report and make an initial assessment of whether we need to leap onto it straight away or whether it's a lower risk thing that can be done further down the line. But we do look at each of those on its own merits, and there's a similar process for environmental incidents as well. But like I say, any incidents should be reported to the incident hotline, or via .gov.uk, and we can take them forward from there. If it's not reported formally, then I could receive emails directly from your calls, but I would then have to phone it through myself. So it's far better to cut out the middleman.
Barbara.
Yeah, thank you. Dave, thank you so much for, like being here. And you must feel as if you're in the spotlight. And so thank you for that. I actually brought the last question up, and on your desk that you will see these photographs. Do you recognise this bridge? Nobody recognises the bridge. No. Well, this is Ham Bridge on the B4204, so it is quite a busy bridge. And
the tractor and baler across it.
Yes, and it's right on a bend. But that's not so much the issue why I brought it up. I've taken photographs of the river team literally from this bridge because it's a public highway rather than trespass on people's lands, because I thought that might be a little bit naughty without asking. So I've actually taken a picture downstream, and I zoomed into a tree in the river downstream, and then I also took a picture upstream. Now, I was born and bred in the Team Valley, so I have known this area the whole of my life, and I have never seen it in such a mess, if that's the right word to use, as I have done the last few years. It actually looks now as if the river's imploded. It used to always be cleared, kept clear of like the vegetation. I think Severn Trent it was in those days used to actually employ lensmen to clear the river, which I'm sure that Doug will remember those, and Dean as well. They used to go up and down the river, and they used to have lens, and they used to keep it nice, clean and tidy. Now, I heard what you were saying a bit earlier on, is that if there's any reports, and then you would work with the landowners, etc. But it seems to me as if the whole stretch of this river, right the way down to Powick Bridge, is in this state. Now, the farmers and the landowners and that are terribly busy people, and they're not going to be able to just drop everything and sort of go and clear the rivers out. So, first of all, I wondered whether there was any grants available or whether there's any help to actually help the landowners to clear the land rather than just to assume that they're going to. I mean, it's a bit unfortunate maybe for some of them that there happens to be a river running through their farms, really. And that's one thing that I would like to ask. The other thing that I mentioned, a tree was blocking the river at Nightwick. Now, that was probably about 8 or 9 months ago. And then when we had some heavy weather, it wasn't flooding, it was heavy weather, the tree was lifted and it was sent on down the river. Now, I'm not going to say that it was this tree for definite, but several people did in fact identify this particular tree, or they thought they had. And that tree was partly responsible for further damage to the Powick Bridge, the old bridge that they're sort of trying to fix. So somehow you can't help but feel a stitch in time will save 9. So my concern is I don't think that the rivers are being maintained as they should be. Can you answer me that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that how rivers are maintained has changed a lot over the years. In terms of a watercourse like this, I'm not familiar with the area to see what's in the wider area. Is this a rural location? I can see fields.
Yes, yes, but you're aware of Tenbury, right?
Absolutely.
So it's the river team that runs through Tenbury, and then this is probably about 5 or 6 miles downstream from Tenbury. So it goes through Stanford, Newmore Bridge, Hanbridge, and then I think the next bridge would be Nightwick, and then on down to Bransfield, and then Powick.
Yeah.
So it's that stretch all the way down there, which is very rural. As I said, I was bred and brought up in the area, and we did used to have flooding, when I was a child, because I could remember us walking down to Hanbridge, especially, to sort of go and see the floods, but nothing like that we're having now. and I just feel that the actual flow of the river is being hampered, and it's just what our chairman is saying. It's sort of driving the problem the whole of the time further and further and further on down. Well, of course, with the river team, it only gets to the Oxbow just down below Powick Bridge, and then it goes into the River Severn, and then that's it, sort of thing. But it's quite obvious, though, that the debris going off down the River Team is in fact damaging that old bridge, which is an ancient monument down at Powick. And bear in mind, too, that Ham Bridge is also an ancient monument.
Yeah, I've been part of discussions with the local MP in Worcester and some interest groups for the old Powick Bridge, and I know Worcestershire County have been as well, about what interventions might be achievable to help reduce the number of trees that arrive at the old Powick Bridge, because for many years there's been many trees that arrive there, I know. In terms of reaches of the team like this, when we get a larger amount of tree growth along the banks, that can slow down the flow slightly. In terms of when the river's in flood, it can make a slight difference. I don't believe it makes a huge difference, but sorry, I've lost my train of thought now. What was I going to say?
Is there any money for looking after the rivers to stop flooding downstream?
We have a maintenance budget, but like I say, we have to target it at those areas where it'll make the most difference for the intervention we can make in terms of homes and livelihoods. So typically, that's in the more not necessarily in towns and cities, but in urban areas where there are more homes and businesses, and so what the work that we carry out will have a bigger impact. But for instances where there are issues that you're concerned about, I would say contact us through the hotline, and we will have a look at each on its own merits, and whether we consider it's in everyone's interest for interventions to occur.
Well, yeah, I hear what you say, which it does make sense, but it would be interesting, maybe that you have, I don't know, but it would be interesting for you to actually take a walk down the length of the river, say, from Stanford right the way down to Powick, just to, well, you probably won't even have to go that far, to be honest, just to sort of witness the actual state of the river. I mean, there's no question about, I mean, well, when I was a kid, we used to swim across that river, believe it or not. But nothing has been mentioned this evening about dredging. Years ago, the River Severn, there was always a dredger by the River Severn, and it used to always go part of the way up the River Team as well. While that would give a deeper draft, or whatever you call it, I really don't know, but it would give a better flow for the rivers. But they don't dredge the rivers anymore. Well, these rivers has got to be well silted by now. You know, so why are the rivers not being cleaned up? That's what I want to know.
In terms of dredging specifically, it is a measure that we use in some locations still, but it isn't suitable for everywhere. It used to be, but our understanding of how river systems work has changed as we learn more, and these days we know that dredging in the wrong place can actually speed up erosion as the river races to replace what's been taken away, and can cause bank instability, sometimes even affecting highway structures that cross the river. So whilst it's a tool, and like I say, we do use it in certain locations, it's not fit for everywhere. There's two types. There's dredging, which is still called dredging, which goes beneath the natural bed level of a watercourse, or there's desilting, which removes the silt down to the natural bed. I mean, yeah, they're both very similar, though, as you can imagine. My apologies for losing my train of thought before it has now come back. What the point I was going to make, because you mentioned about how whilst they used to get floods, there weren't as many, and I completely agree. We are seeing more regular flooding. The highest levels that we're seeing, if we look at the data so far, are broadly in line with the highest levels we've seen historically, but we're just getting those levels far more often now, and that plays out in how many times we deploy our assets at Bewdley, at Shrewsbury, and all of those other sites up and down the Severn. Yeah, it is happening.
Thank you. Has deforestation slowed down, or is that one of the main reasons why this is getting worse? Because, to be honest, everywhere you look, there are a lot less trees surviving. It's not necessarily they're being cut down deliberately, but they seem to be just, even in hedges, falling apart, getting blown over. What's the overall forestry kind of level comparatively in that River Severn Basin area compared to, say, how it was a couple of decades ago?
I don't know offhand. I mean, Forestry England would probably be the best organisation, or maybe the Woodland Trust might have data such as that. So I don't know is the honest answer. But I do know that there's an awful lot now of replanting that's happening, because we all know and understand that water will run off a forest far slower than it will run off a field.
Well, that has relevance to what's happened with Malvern, because where they've cut down loads and loads of trees, the water obviously has undermined the roads. But anyway, Dean.
The value of trees in helping to retain riverbanks. I mean, I'm particularly worried these days, and again, it's sort of probably off key for you, but the lack of footpath going up the Severn between Worcester and Holt now because of the way that the erosion of the river's taking place there. And part of that is, I think, because trees have been removed over the years, which is unfortunate. My other query, whilst we're on it, and I assume you have responsibility for the pumps that go in at Severn at Worcester.
On Hilton Road,
Yeah.
I know Severn Trent Water have their pumps
So
there. When we deployed, we were sort of working partnership with them.
Because I always wonder, and I always get quizzed by this by my wife, who says, "Why do they keep taking them away?"
I can get you an official answer for that. I'm more than happy to come back to the committee with that. I know Severn Trent have a certain number of pumps that they have, and they deploy them in a certain order when required. But I'll be able to get a far more official sounding response from that if you like.
Deploying them so often.
Rather than it's
Chris.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, Barbara. You referred to it a little earlier on in answering one of Barbara's questions about resources. And I'm just curious about what you could do, or if you think you don't have enough resources, and what you could do if you had the adequate resources. So do you feel you're resourced properly? Or do you think that we've got the problems that we're all talking about here because you are under-resourced?
I don't think we're under-resourced. I think we are having to change to meet the challenges of the climate and how that's changing. And we're using part of that approach to ensure that whilst we've got responsibilities and powers, that other organisations and individuals who have responsibilities and duties to do their bit, that they do their bit as well. So it whilst we've got powers, it doesn't all fall to us, but we can help ensure that everyone does their bit for the greater good.
Barbara.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that's a good question. But yeah, I did mention earlier on that were there any grants available for landowners, or is there any help that landowners can actually have off the environment, whether it be financial or other, to help them maintain their riverbanks, bearing in mind that landowners, farmers, are all terribly busy, and they're not going to be that flush with money. So I just wondered what help the government, if any, might be giving them.
I'm not an expert in this area, but I know there are stewardship schemes whereby landowners can receive payments for planting trees, for installing fences to keep livestock away from the banks of a watercourse to stop it poaching and collapsing, that type of thing. I'm more than happy to go away and get the relative information. Yeah.
Thank you. Right. Can I actually end on quite a positive note, because the awful excavations that took place under the M50, the huge kind of excavations there were terrible to look at for years and years and years, and now they look absolutely fantastic. The wildlife there, the trees around the edges, they are absolutely amazing. And when you drive over the M50, you just look down and you think, crikey, I was really wrong. I thought they were going to be really, they were going to be blots on the landscape forever. So with some thought and some care, you can end up with something that looks quite good as a result of necessary work. And I just hope it happens in Upton as well, because there at the moment we have this enormous hole, and it flooded and it looked like it was going to turn into a lovely lake, and then it emptied again. And I just hope that there is a long-term plan for some of these things, because it's very important for the long-term future of this area that we do not spoil it. So I just wanted to just say that. Okay. Thank you very much for coming. It's been very informative today. Sorry, Godwin. Yes? Douglas.
Yes.
Councillor, even.
Yes.
Sorry, I've got
Right.
that wrong.
Okay. The Environment Agency. National body. Paid by taxpayers. Quite happy to pursue a farmer who has an accidental spell of manure that contaminates a watercourse. £200,000 fine, 4 years in prison. But will not prosecute Severn Trent for polluting our rivers with sewage and God knows what else. There is no reciprocity. There is no equity in it. I have no influence on your organisation. I can write letters to, I'm blue in my face. I've got a file this thick on Sugars Lane pumping station, and is as much as I got as a reply. There's no councillors on your board of management or on your area management. We can't elect people onto you. We have no influence whatsoever. Do you really wonder why people have so little trust in the Environment Agency? There is no reciprocity in your management whatsoever. You do as we say, and that's it. There's no comeback, and if you don't, you're in court. I'll mention the River Lug. Thank you very much.
I mean, not really one for me to answer.
No, I want
based
you to
on-
pass
on
it
my-
up to your management.
I'm more than
Right, in
happy
some
to do
order.
that.
There was cross-fertilisation between the businesses. You are a take it or leave it organisation. From a legal point of view, if I write to you, your department, it's 60 days before I get a response. And if that was in private practice, you'd be out of business or you'd be prosecuted for negligence.
Okay, Councillor Allen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I thought I would just keep you informed as you expressed an interest in Upton and the mineral extraction. I agreed with officers about a year ago to extend the planning permission as the local county council there because Cemex had fallen behind due to the weather, so it wasn't their fault. So they couldn't extract the minerals if everything's flooded. They've now completed the extraction, and what they're doing is, in fact, removing the causeway, which was the bit in the middle to allow them to actually get the vehicles down. They should be handing it over by Christmas, so I think that's pretty good news. And then we just need a planning application or two to come into Malvern Hills for us to turn it into a rowing lake, and I'd probably be minded to support that when it appears. Thank you.
Minded. Yes. Please note that word. Thank you. Let's move on. Sorry, Dean, last comment. Yeah, I think everybody does appreciate you coming today, and thank you very much for that. Who would we get here to talk about refuse being dumped? Illegal waste.
Yeah, if it's a significant illegal waste site, then we may get involved. What I would say is any future involvement you want from us at committee, if you drop me a line, I can make sure that the right people come along, and that includes if you'd like someone from the agency to come along and talk about your points raised as well. I'm more than happy to get the right person here. Outside, that's not flood risk, but yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming. We'll let you go now before you commit to 10 other things as well. Thank you. Right, the annual report will not be going to the next council meeting because unfortunately I am not going to be there because I have, thank you very much, I've got to go for a hospital operation. So we're going to defer it to the council meeting afterwards if that's okay with everybody. So that item on the agenda isn't for tonight really, we'll put that on the next meeting's agenda. Yes. That was a very big point from the pre-meet, wasn't it? We definitely need to sort that out. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, do we want to agree it now so that it's ready for the next meeting, because we might not match up with our meetings.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay. All right. We'll do it that way around then. Sorry, I didn't realise there was going to be a scheduling problem. But, and yeah, that's fine. So can we just discuss that annual report then? Was there anything in it that you wanted to bring up or change?
I only want to bring up that I thought it was a brilliant report, and to thank it for the format and the contents, and I was just really pleased to read it.
Well, that's great. Well done, Jen. Thank you very much for that. We really appreciate it. That's brilliant. Okay, well, in that case, we will be able to put that. It's formally approved, yeah. So, yeah, can we have a proposer, Dean, and a seconder, Christine? Is that okay, Jen? Yeah, okay, fantastic. Right, the council's forward plan is the next item. We are probably not going to go into detail on that. Is there anything that you would like to bring up about that? Nope. And then the overview and scrutiny work programme. We had a little bit of a chat about that pre-meeting, but if there are other items that you would like to be on the agenda, then please can you write to Jen with them, and then we will have them available at the next pre-meet, because that's when we're going to discuss that properly for the next period. Sorry.
Question for me, really, is there's a work plan meeting, I think, in the diary, I believe.
Yeah, it's July the 14th, I think, isn't it? Yeah.
July the 14th. I've got something to bring to that as a suggestion, Paul, but I'll talk to you before that meeting.
Right. Okay. Well, that's great. Gosh, that's nice. Sorry, Christine.
Yeah, can I just ask Vic when you think we should kick off with the scrutiny of the LGR process?
That was the one thing I wanted to bring to that meeting. I was going to suggest that we maybe want to think about how we get this committee involved in the local government reorganisation process, and I was going to suggest probably suggest a task and finish group from this committee to get into some of the detail, meeting fairly regularly, because it's going to be a fast-moving thing as we get past the decision in July. So it'd be useful to get, a number of you in a room to take you through the detail, to get instant feedback, to sort out communications with the wider membership of the council and all that sort of thing. So that was one thing I was going to bring to that work plan meeting.
Yeah.
So you've got a work plan meeting in July, and I was going to bring it to that meeting, and if you're happy with that, given everything else that you want to look at in the year, then we would take that forward as something for this committee to do.
I think that's a very good idea, because the overview is of the forward overview as opposed to the past. So yes, that's our function really. Also, it means that other councillors can come along to that, because otherwise it would be at council meetings and it would probably be compressed for time because of all the other agenda items. So this is the best discussion forum for that anyway. Yeah, it's brilliant. Good idea.
Yeah, but what's the briefing about June, on the 25th of June, we're having an LGA conference, aren't we?
You're saying you've got a member briefing on the 25th of June on LGR?
Yeah.
Is it something by...
Presentation. LGA conference.
Right, okay, so that's nothing to do with LGR, Local Reorganisation. We're doing a presentation at the National LGA Conference by Amanda Smith's team on... Yeah.
I got my A's and my R's.
And that's a run through of that presentation, not related to LGR.
Not, okay. Sorry.
Because that was the one I was chairing and then we moved it.
So basically we will it'll be the first chance to discuss the LGR programme going forward will be at this next meeting, which is really good, isn't it, when you think about it? Okay, fantastic. Is there anything else that anybody would like to discuss before we draw a close to this? Yes, I did. I don't think it's covered by the remit of the committee, really, but I will talk to you about it separately. Okay, no worries. Thank you. Is that it? Okay, we'll call a halt to it. Thank you very much for coming, everybody.